Explain like I'm 5. How does this even work? Really?
Why do 50% of people who break their hip die within a year of doing so? What is the connection to breaking your hip and dying?
Several reasons. For one, people who break their hips tend to be quite elderly, and elderly people are at very high risk of dying for a lot of reasons. This is a correlation, not causation, as some people have pointed out. But there are causational factors too. An elderly person who breaks their hip will often have to go into the hospital to get surgery or other kinds of treatment. Surgery is always risky and can cause infections and other complications, but especially in the elderly who have less well-functioning body systems in general. Prolonged hospital stays also increase the risk of infection by the nasty kind of bugs that tend to hang around in hospitals, like pneumonia, C. difficile, or MRSA, and again, elderly people are more vulnerable. Finally, being immobilized for a long period of time, as will happen when you break your hip, as well as the actual trauma of surgery, puts you at huge risk of having blood clots that form in your legs, especially when you're elderly. These blood clots can then travel into your lungs and cause pulmonary embolisms. This is a huge cause of death in hospitals. It's the most common reason why people die after surgery. I originally said it was 1/3 of all hospital deaths, but that doesn't seem to be correct. Apologies.
Why is it that spicy food always seems so much spicier when hot temperature?
I forget the actual receptor name. It's been a while. TRP bone from a quick Google search, but we call the sensation hot because it quite literally is binding to receptors on your tongue and in your mouth that relate to sensing/regulating temperature and can produce pain/irritability responses, etc. Eating foods that are hot in temperature. Another trigger for these receptors/related thermal receptors then is an additive effect for your overall sensation of sensing hot/increased temperature. Menthol, like menthol cigarettes, has the opposite effect that works in a similar way in that it binds to TPRMate to create the cooling effect.
How does reattaching limb/body parts work? When a limb or other body part gets severed, how does reattaching it work? Do doctors/surgeons/etc. have to reconnect every single nerve-ending blood vessel/blood arteries, strands of muscle and cartilage, etc. somehow? If they reconnect blood vessels/arteries, how does the reconnection process work? Since blood vessels are basically hollow cylinders, do they reconnect it in a way that somehow allows blood to flow again?
They do so to gather muscles and nerves and veins the best they can. But the general goal is not to make it perfect or even good. The goal is to turn it from a totally disconnected arm that is across the room to a really bad injury the body can heal. Like you don't sew the bone together so it's perfect. You get it good enough it's just a broken bone that could heal. And like you don't sew the muscles to the point it's a perfectly working muscle. You just sew it till it's a big injury that could heal, etc. You don't sew every single tiny vein. You sew enough of them just good enough the arm won't die, then it will heal that over time itself.
How does an atomic clock work? How does it start telling extremely precise time?
Real atomic clocks use some gas of a specific element, like cesium or rubidium. The element has a natural resonance frequency, which means it interacts most strongly with microwaves of a specific frequency. You stick the gas in a box and beam microwaves at it. You can then detect how strongly the gas interacts with the microwaves, e.g., by producing more microwaves or absorbing them depending on the design. So you have a circuit generate the microwaves at an adjustable frequency, and then you have another circuit basically tune the first one until it finds the best frequency. Much like you would manually tune a radio to a station until you get the best reception. After a while, the whole thing slowly becomes very stable when the right frequency is found and narrowed down. To count seconds, you have a third circuit just divide down the microwave signal. Since you know the frequency at which the gas should resonate, you just count up to that number, and every time you reach it, a second has passed. The store-bought clocks you find labeled atomic clocks are just normal clocks with a radio receiver that picks up time signals sent by a radio station that itself has a real atomic clock.
How can an absurdly small amount of deadly poison like botulinum kill a human? I can't understand how a small grain, a speck of toxin, can kill a grown adult. If this has been asked before, please redirect me to the post.
The botulism toxin can do this because it's an enzyme. It cleaves a critical neurotransmitter protein in half, then resets to do it again, and again, and again. A single molecule can keep dicing up the protein and disabling a neuron for hours before it finally degrades. In that time, you've been unable to breathe because the signal pathway is all locked up. Compare that to a poison molecule like carbon monoxide that disables a single protein and is then permanently expended.
Before the invention of glasses, were people with bad vision just doomed to the miserable existence?
It's an interesting fact that, until recently, women tended to be nearsighted, can't see far away, and men tended to be farsighted, can't see close up. Since women were more likely to do close-up work like sewing or checking for rot in stored food, and men were hunting, vision problems of this type caused less of a problem. There's a bunch of bullcrap answers in this thread. The truth is that while blindness or bad vision due to eye damage, parasites, cataracts, etc. was relatively more common in the past than it is today, on the whole people had better vision because nearsightedness was very rare. Because nearsightedness is mostly a disease of the modern world, so most vision problems in the past couldn't have been fixed by glasses, and the main vision problem fixed by glasses in the modern world was vanishingly rare. Nearsightedness results from spending time indoors a lot as a child. The lack of strong illumination interferes with the mechanism controlling the growth of the eyes, resulting in eyes that are too long and as a result causing nearsightedness because the image focuses in front of the retina. This has been demonstrated in animal models and the biochemical mechanism is understood. This results in a very well-documented pattern. In societies which are not industrialized, nearsightedness is rare to practically non-existent. Surveys of hunter-gatherers and other groups living in traditional ways find almost no one who is nearsighted. As societies industrialize, nearsightedness skyrockets. There is a very good data set from Singapore on this. Vision is important. All this nonsense about you not really needing to see more than a blur to spot predators and prey is baloney. Animals in the wild are camouflaged, hide effectively among the terrain, and are quite hard to spot without a good vision to see them. And that's not to mention foraging for plants, which are nearly impossible to identify at a distance without good vision.
Christina Koch returned from a 328 days mission aboard the ISS. In college, we learned that she would not experience time the same as us on Earth over the 328 days. How can this be true, and by how much younger would she be than you or I? In my undergrad physics course, we were taught the basics of relativity. It was explained to us that something moving near the speed of light can somewhat time travel when compared to a stationary observer. So, how much younger would astronaut Koch be than us, and how does this phenomena work?
The ISS experiences about 0.7 seconds less time for every 6 months, or about 14 milliseconds a year. It all stems from the speed of light being the same in all reference frames. Normally, if you run in the same direction as a bicyclist is cycling, they will seem slower, and if you run in the opposite direction, they will seem faster. This isn't true with the hard cap on light speed. If you run toward light or away from some massless particle at light speed, it doesn't go faster or slower. So while that car going 20 is going 25 mph relative to you if you run it at 5, and it is only going 15 relative to you if you try and chase it, the light will always be going light speed no matter how fast you chase it, massless light. This has been confirmed as real and not math errors, as GPS systems and the like need to account for it to work, otherwise they're off. I'm sorry I didn't do a great job, I just don't think there's a truly effective way for this. You just have to accept some stuff because the human experience has no real reference for near light speeds, so it doesn't make sense to our brains. It's like trying to tell a turtle that's only ever lived in a sheltered cave about how when you run really fast you have to take wind resistance into account. But it doesn't really matter if you're just plodding along. You will have no real experience with it.
Why does air blowing in your face help you feel less carsick? Always wondered why it helped at least me when I was younger and got carsick a lot.
To give a hypothesis, the main theory of motion sickness is that your eyes and inner ear disagree about what is going on with relation to your motion. You're bumping around and your inner ear fluids are sloshing about. But your eyes tell you that you're relatively stationary in the car, so the feeling of wind on your face gives your brain more sensory input that, at a subconscious level, tells you that you are moving, even if other signs are missing.
One theory is that when your brain gets different signals from your inner ear versus your eyes, it assumes you have been positioned and are having hallucinations, so nausea kicks in to induce vomiting.
How is acid capable of corroding materials? What enables it to have this property?
Corrosive reactions are reactions, two or more molecules encountering each other, thinking, you know what, let's become something else, and then becoming something else. This happens because the end results of the reaction are a more preferable state to be in, thermodynamically. Let's take an example: hydrochloric acid and sodium metal. In its normal state, Sodium is just a bunch of sodium atoms all in one place. Hydrochloric acid is made by dissolving the covalent HCl molecule in water, creating a solution with a lot of charged hydrogen and charged chlorine atoms. A charged molecule loves to react with things, is probably the most you need to know about them. Normally, hydrogen and chlorine don't really like each other when they are in water together, so they dissociate, instead of remaining as HCl. They also don't like being alone, though, and can only hang out in their gaseous forms when they are stuck to another atom of the same element. However, because of how they share electrons, they can't do this. That's a really complicated thing though that I suspect you don't need to know about. Then you drop some sodium into the mix. Charged chlorine loves to stick to sodium, so every chlorine atom in the acid plucks one sodium atom off the sodium piece, forming sodium chloride. This moves some electrons around, and allows the hydrogen to float off as hydrogen gas, hence why this reaction fizzes. Sodium chloride, meanwhile, is an ionic compound. Common table salt, in fact, which dissolves in water and which forms crystals, not metals. So, gradually, the size of the sodium piece gets smaller, because sodium is being ripped off to become sodium chloride, and the acid also becomes less acidic because the molecules that make it acidic are being turned into salts and gases. The acidic property of acids comes from the fact that hydrogen atoms dissociate from their compounds while dissolved in water. Not all hydrogen-containing compounds do this, but the ones that do are called acids. The amount to which they dissociate. Not all molecules will dissociate all the time. Only a proportion of all the molecules determines the strength of the acid.
How do trees stay alive during the winter when it's really cold and all their leaves fall off?
When a tree's leaves fall off, it is essentially entering a state of hibernation. Its metabolic processes slow to nearly a standstill, and it uses stores of sugars, sap as an energy source until warmer weather returns.
Why are we not literally crapping the bed often? Since being married, I've learned that we all fart in our sleep. My wife does it, but she claims I do it a lot. At the same time, I'm sure we've all trusted a fart we shouldn't have in our lives. So how is it our unconscious self has better control over our bodies than our conscious self? At first, I thought the answer was simply pressure. Enough pressure builds up and just forces its way out, while our waking self usually tries to force it. But I'm sure there's times #2 has plenty of pressure to force its way out also.
Essentially, you kind of do. When you fart, tiny bits will fly out. However, it's easier for gas to accelerate quickly out of the opening in the sphincter than large solids that are easily seen. If you blow on a paper wad or something, you'll see how much air you have to blow to propel a solid forward. It really doesn't take much gas leaving the bowel to relieve the pressure. If you have enough pure solid in your colon to force its way out without gas, you're likely going to wake up, unless you are drunk/drugged, which is why those folks do occasionally crap themselves.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to Karma Farm to get more videos just like this.